Hello and welcome back to Grim Tales. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy dark, twisted, grim tales that send chills down your spine, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1, I do not really know where else to put this, so I am putting it here. You can listen to it or read it. That part is up to you. My name is Charlie, and I still do not know where to start. If I did not have voice assistant software, I would not be able to write any of this down at all. Not after what happened to my eyes last year. I used to be a freelance archivist. I suppose I still am in some way, but I do not work the way I used to. I grew up in a small valley town called Redgate on the northern coast of California. Most people have never heard of it. The town sits between two coastal ridges, and those ridges do strange things to the weather. They keep the fog away and trap the heat inside the valley from June through September. Redgate was mostly known for artichoke farms. The fields ran right up behind the houses on the east side of town. In the summer, the whole place smelled like cut hay, hot soil, and something sharper underneath it. Something almost like sulfur. That smell is still the first thing I think of when someone mentions Redgate. I left Redgate when I was 19. I came back 11 years later because a woman named Ruth had died, and she had left behind a house full of old papers. No one in her family wanted to deal with any of it. Ruth had no children, and her husband, Glenn, had been dead since 2003. Her niece lived in Sacramento, and she asked if I could come down and make the whole mess stop being her problem. She offered me $300 a day. Plus expenses. I agreed. She accepted so quickly that I later realized she had plenty of money, and I had asked for far too little. She never asked what I would actually be doing with 60 years of her aunt's records. Ruth had worked as an administrative secretary for 3 medical practices in Redgate, one after another. From 1962 onward, she worked for a general doctor named Hollis. Then she worked for a dentist named Sperber through the mid-70s and into the mid-80s. Finally, she worked for Dr. Shaw, the only pediatric eye doctor within 40 miles. She worked for him from 1984 until the records stopped around 1989. Dr. Shaw died in August of 1997. I remembered there had been a memorial for him in town, though I had been young then and did not pay much attention. I arrived at Ruth's house on a Monday morning in July of 2009. I had 2 boxes of archival sleeves, my scanner, and a thermos of coffee that had gone cold by 9 because I had forgotten to drink it. The summer sun was already baking the streets. The sky was clear, flat, and merciless. There was almost no shade anywhere. The neighborhood around Ruth's house felt half empty. The houses were spread apart, and maybe every other one looked occupied. I got out of my old rusted van and walked to the front door. I almost knocked out of habit before remembering that no one would answer. I let myself in with the key Ruth's niece had left for me at the post office. Inside, the house smelled like old paper and spoiled milk. Ruth had kept every window shut and every curtain covered for so long that the house seemed to have its own stale weather. The blackout curtains on the south side were thick and plastic, like hotel curtains, and they had been sealed down with painter's tape. Even on a bright afternoon, that side of the house felt like it was living in a different hour. The living room was crowded with boxes stacked around a coffee table and an L-shaped couch. I opened the curtains where I could, mostly for light, and started sorting. Ruth's records were very organized. Everything was divided by decade, then by medical practice, then alphabetically. Dr. Hollis took most of the first day. Sperber got me through the second day. By Wednesday, I had reached the Shaw materials. There were 7 boxes for Shaw, compared to 4 for Hollis and 3 for Sperber. The boxes held prescription records, appointment logs, insurance letters, pediatric assessment forms, and all kinds of office paperwork. Everything was clean, dated, and cross-referenced. I found the ledger at the bottom of the 7th box, under a stack of vision assessment forms from 1989. That was where it began. I wish I had never opened it. The past should stay where it is. It should sit there under dust, untouched by the future. But once I opened that book, there was no way for me to go back and undo it. The ledger was about the size of a hardback novel. It had a dark maroon leather cover, cracked along the spine, with no title on the front. I opened it carefully. The spine made a dry cracking sound. At first, I was only looking for information I could transcribe for the offices Ruth had worked with, but I found something else. A few old sticky notes fell from the pages. Most of the writing on them was worn and hard to read. One note looked like it said, "Read her a song?" No, maybe a piece of song, but the rest was broken and smudged. Another had part of a phone number, 369-814-21, and nothing else. One note said, "You fool, she was just being nice." They felt personal, tired, and mostly useless. I set them aside and went back to the ledger. The first page had numbers written in a neat list. It seemed to match a chronological list of audio logs. The numbers pointed to a box I had not noticed before, tucked behind the sofa. Inside the box were audio tapes and an old recording device. The tapes were labeled 1 through 7. The rest of the journal was mostly side notes. At first, none of it looked important. I found the first tape. The ink on the label had mostly worn off. I put it into the recorder. For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice came through, deep, nasal, and slow. Dr. Shaw sounded like a slow talker, a slow man. On the first recording, he said his name and complained about using the machine. He sounded irritated, as if even the act of recording annoyed him. Then he spoke to a girl named Clara. He told her not to tell her mother he was recording. Clara said okay. Dr. Shaw asked her why her mother was worried about her eyes. Clara said her mother thought staring at the sky was not good. Shaw asked if she had been staring at the sky. Clara said yes. He told her the sun could harm her eyes, especially in that region, and asked if her eyes hurt when she looked up. Clara answered with a question that made my fingers pause on the recorder. Why would they hurt? Then the audio broke apart into white noise. It was not normal static. It sounded like static being recorded through another layer of static, as if the tape was playing the sound of a recording inside a recording. It did not continue. I took the tape out, blew dust off it, and tried again. The same thing happened in the same place. I was annoyed, so I put it aside and moved on to the second tape, hoping it was not damaged, too. The second tape was another assessment, this time with a boy named Max. The questions started the same way, but this recording did not cut off right away. Dr. Shaw began by saying the first recording had unbecome of itself, which was a strange way to describe a tape failure. He complained again that he hated using machines like this. Then Max entered the room with his mother, Anna. Anna introduced herself and told Dr. Shaw she hoped he could help change Max's new habits. She sounded worried. Dr. Shaw told her that was why he was there, and that he hoped they could find the root of the problem quickly. Anna noticed the recorder and asked if he was recording. Dr. Shaw lied. He said the machine was old and had not been used in years. He told her he took patient privacy seriously. Anna seemed relieved and left Max alone with him. There was a quiet space on the tape after that. I could hear papers moving and Dr. Shaw shifting around. I guessed he was reading Max's file. Then, Dr. Shaw told Max it looked like he had been observing the universe. Max corrected him and said, "You mean the sky." Dr. Shaw agreed and asked what was so interesting that he would risk his vision for it. He called vision seeing powers, probably trying to sound friendly. Max told him there were no seeing powers. Dr. Shaw asked why Max liked looking up there. Max answered, "If I don't look at it, it's going to die." That line made me sit still. Children can say strange things, but the way Max said it was so plain. There was no drama in his voice, no fear. He said it like he was talking about watering a plant. Dr. Shaw paused before asking Max to explain. Max asked if he meant yarrow. Shaw repeated the name and asked if it was like the yellow flower. Max only said the name again. Dr. Shaw asked what yarrow did, what it wanted, and what it looked like. Before Max could answer, Shaw swore. The tape cut out with a click. Just before the audio ended, I heard a wet, gagging sound, like someone vomiting. I assumed Max had thrown up during the interview. I searched for the third tape, but could not find it. I checked the box, the room, Ruth's bedroom, and anything nearby that looked like it might have hidden storage. Ruth's bedroom was mostly empty, like the rest of the house. I found nothing. Disappointed, I picked up the tape labeled 4 and put it into the recorder. The fourth recording started with Dr. Shaw speaking alone. He sounded tired and tense. He said he was worried the heat would get to the children. He said the heat was unbearable, and even the air conditioners in town barely did anything. Then, he said everyone in Redgate adored him. But they did not know he hated the town. He hated being there. Yet he could not make himself leave because the people needed him. He mentioned a boy named William. He said William must have been on the missing third tape, and that he had rescheduled an interview with him ever since the boy had said something strange. Shaw wondered what could make a child say something like that. He said all the children were having similar experiences. He wondered if someone was spreading drugs around town as part of a cruel prank. Then, his voice lowered. He said maybe it was something else, but he could not say. He ended by saying that part of him wanted William to keep looking up and south of the artichoke fields, because maybe William could tell him more. That recording was short. I had not heard William's first interview because the third tape was missing, but I thought I might learn more from the later ones. Then, someone knocked on the door. The sound startled me badly. Ruth's house had been so still and dead that the knock felt like something had broken through the air. I stood up and answered the door. A woman was standing there. She said her name was Sophia. She lived 2 houses down. I greeted her and told her my name was Charlie. I explained that I was archiving some of Ruth's old records for the offices at City Hall. Sophia looked careful and tired. She said she had stopped by because she thought the house might be getting robbed. Then she asked to see some credentials. All I had on me was my phone and a couple of pens. My business card was somewhere in my backpack, buried among the boxes. I told her I would find it and invited her inside. I do not know why I felt the need to invite her in. Ruth would not have cared. She was dead. Still, Sophia stepped inside slowly, leaving the door open behind her. She looked around at the mess, the boxes, and the dim living room where thin strips of light cut across the floor. Heat came in through the open door, and sweat started running down my temple. I found my cards and gave one to her. It had my name, my company name, and my phone number. Sophia looked satisfied. She asked how I knew Ruth. I told her I had not known her well, but I had grown up in Redgate. Ruth's niece had called me because I did this kind of work. Sophia nodded, then looked at the tapes and the old recorder on the table. She asked what they were. I did not know how to answer at first. I could have lied, but I did not see much point. Ruth's old office life had not seemed that private or interesting before the tapes. And besides, I had already gone farther than my job probably required. I told Sophia I was listening to some old audio logs from a doctor Ruth had worked for. I said I was checking if they had anything important that needed to be documented, but they had turned out to be strange. Sophia said it sounded like I was poking through the privacy veil. I had not expected her to challenge me. I expected her to leave once she knew who I was, but she did not. She stayed there, watching the recorder and the box. So I had an idea. I told her the tapes were actually pretty creepy and asked if she wanted to listen. She hesitated, but in the end, she said yes. She still looked uncomfortable in Ruth's dead living room, but curiosity had already caught her. I gave her some context, and then I put in the fifth tape. The fifth recording began with Shaw talking to himself again. He said he could not stand to look at the sky for 10 seconds in that blazing heat, under the naked sun, let alone for minutes at a time. He said he did not know what was making the children all look up in the same direction. South, he talked about the sulfur smell, the dry artichokes, the soil, and the fields the children kept mentioning. Then the recording shifted. A boy's voice came through. It was William. Doctor. Shaw greeted William and his mother, Samantha. Samantha sounded worn down by the summer. She said William had been staring at the sky more than usual, and she was worried he would blind himself. She said she could barely let him leave the house anymore. Shaw told her worrying was in a mother's nature, but he hoped he could ease her fears. Then Samantha left the room. Sophia asked me if the mothers knew their children were being recorded. I told her it did not sound like they did. I also said this did not match what I remembered people saying about Dr. Shaw. He had been respected in town. On the tape, Shaw asked William how he was doing. William said his eyes did not feel good. Shaw asked how. William said that when he blinked, his eyes felt heavy. Shaw told him that was normal after staring at the sun. William snapped, "I'm not staring at the sun. It's Yarrow." Shaw apologized and asked him to tell him more about Yarrow. William said his eyes hurt. Shaw told him to wait a second. Then there were sounds that made it seem like Shaw left the room. For a few moments, there was only silence. Then William spoke. But the voice was wrong. He began reciting a rhyme about petals curling black, the burning summer, and an unblinking hand or eye drinking fragile symmetry. The words were strange enough, but the voice was worse. It was deeper than a child's voice should have been. There was a shaking sound inside it, almost like two grown men speaking the same words half a second apart. Sophia and I looked at each other. At first, I thought William must have been talking to someone else, but there had been no other voice in the room. Shaw had left him alone. I asked what that had been. Sophia asked who he was talking to. I said there was no one in there with him, at least not on the tape. Then I tried to make it sound normal. I told Sophia the audio was probably corrupted. The tapes were old, after all. That was a reasonable explanation, and it helped for a moment. We kept listening. Footsteps returned on the recording. Shaw came back and told William he was going to plug something in. William asked what it was. His voice sounded like a normal child again. Shaw told him it was a device used to look into his eye. He told William to put his chin on the rest and look into the red dots. William said he saw the red lasers. Shaw told him not to blink. Then there was a long stretch of silence and small movements. I skipped ahead a little because Sophia looked impatient. By then, she had settled into the room more comfortably. The fear had turned into interest. When the recording picked up again, Shaw told William they were done for the day and told him to go get his mother. Then the log cut off suddenly. Sophia asked if Shaw had ended it himself. I could only shrug. It did sound like he had stopped it on purpose. I started searching for the 6th tape. Sophia asked what I thought was going on with the children. I told her that if I had to guess, maybe it was some kind of sickness. Maybe the heat had something to do with it. But I could not say for sure. Then I stopped and looked at her. I realized the kids on the recordings would be around Sophia's age by then, give or take a few years. I asked if she recognized any of the names. She said no. She said people moved in and out of Redgate, mostly out because of the heat. That was when I should have remembered how little I really knew about the town by then. I had once lived there, but 11 years away had made Redgate strange to me. My family was gone. My brothers were somewhere else in the world. My mother had moved back to Michigan near the lakes. There was nothing left of our old life there. I had returned as an outsider, and I was too careless to understand that. I found the 6th tape. The label was faded and dusty. I replaced the 5th tape and pressed play. Sophia leaned closer. On the 6th recording, Shaw said he had put on sunscreen because his pale skin would fail under the sun. He said he had never liked the outdoors, which was one reason he had chosen his profession. He had gone out to the fields, he said. The dry artichokes were there, and the sulfur smell burned his nose. He sneezed over and over. The whole place was as unpleasant as he remembered. He said he wanted to experience what the children might have been experiencing. But he felt nothing. There was only the sun pouring heat down on him. Then he noticed the yellow yarrow flowers growing along the dry grass. They should have been dead in that heat, with no shade, but they were not. They were bright and alive, almost proud of it. He found them near old brickwork from a demolished house that had once belonged to the Langleys. Shaw said he picked one of the flowers. He recorded the message a day later and said the flower looked normal. There was nothing special about it except the fact that the children kept saying its name. He asked if that was what they meant. Was that what they were trying to keep alive? He said none of it made sense. Then he spoke as if he knew someone might someday be listening. He said if there was a listener, then they would know the sound he was talking about. The sound of water rushing. The constant sound of the air conditioner. In Redgate summers, it never turned off. He said his ears had learned to treat that sound as silence. But when he turned the air conditioner off, he heard something similar underneath the quiet. Not true silence, but something like thick water rushing somewhere nearby. I asked what that was supposed to mean. Sophia answered slowly. She said she thought she understood him. She said she had grown numb to the sound of the act, too. I did not answer. Outside, the sunlight was starting to fade. There were maybe 1 or 2 hours left before full dark. I did not know how to tell Sophia to leave. Did I even want her to leave? It was not my house, but I had been given the key and the job. In that moment, it felt like I had the right to decide when the day was over. I was tired, sweaty, and needed a shower. Still, I was deeply interested in the tapes. Sophia looked up from the recorder and asked if I wanted to continue. I sat there for a moment before saying, maybe tomorrow. I told her I was tired and that she could come by in the morning. Then I told her I was surprised she was so interested in the logs. She said her father had been an old friend of Dr. Shaw. She said she had not known Shaw personally, but it was nice to know what the man went through at the end of his career. I nodded and showed her out. She walked 2 houses down, waved once, and disappeared inside her home. After she left, I slumped on to Ruth's couch. I ignored how dusty and stale it was. The last thing Sophia had said kept repeating in my head. It was nice to know what the man went through at the end of his career. I had not told her when the tapes were made. She had said she knew almost nothing about Shaw beyond his reputation in town. So how did she know this was near the end of his career? The tapes could have come from any time during his work. Still, I told myself I might be reading too much into it. Maybe it was just a phrase. Maybe she had not meant anything. I closed my eyes and fell into a heavy sleep. The next morning came hard. The tape I had used to hold the curtains in place had slipped loose during the night, and the living room was already hot when I woke. My shirt was soaked with sweat. I sealed the curtains again, turned the yak as high as it would go, and took a cold shower. It took the water a long minute to actually turn cold. Halfway through the shower, I felt a hand slide around my stomach. It was smooth and slow, like someone standing behind me had reached around my body. I spun around fast. There was nothing there but tile and running water. I told myself it was bad sleep. Bad sleep can do strange things to the mind. I reviewed the notes from the day before touching the 7th tape. I had told Sophia she could come by, so I waited. She arrived on time. That surprised me. She wore a white sundress with small petal designs on it. The dress looked light, made for the heat. Her hair was still wet, as if she had rushed to get ready. She apologized and said she had barely dried her hair after her shower because she did not want to make me wait. I told her it was fine and handed her a towel. It was a little damp, but she did not seem to mind. While she dried her hair, I put the 7th tape into the recorder. She sat beside me. The recording started with Shaw speaking to a boy named Glenn. Shaw asked him why he thought he was there. Glenn responded with a strange, childish sound and told him he was not supposed to talk to him. Then he spat. Shaw snapped at him, calling him an imbecile, and dragged him out of the room. Sophia laughed at the recording, and I could not help smiling, too. There was something ridiculous about hearing the calm, respected doctor. Shaw lose control because a child had spat on him. On the tape, Shaw told Glenn's mother that her son had spat on him. The mother was shocked and embarrassed. Shaw told her the appointment was canceled and that she could make another one if she wanted, but not through the front desk. Then there was a click that made us think the recording had ended. But another click followed, and Shaw's voice came back. He said he did not want to make too many logs, so he would count the whole thing as one. He said to erase what had happened in the first part of the recording. Then he said he had been thinking about what Glenn had said before spitting on him. He did not believe Glenn had been talking about his mother, not based on the mother's reaction. He was starting to believe that Yarrow was influencing the children. All of them seemed to speak about Yarrow in the same way. Shaw said he did not know whether Yarrow was a child, a teenager, or a group of children playing some absurd, blinding game. He said he simply did not know. There was another click. I reached for the recorder to stop it, but Sophia grabbed my wrist. She whispered, "Do you hear that?" I listened. At first, there was almost nothing. Then I heard it, a low drum of white noise, like an air conditioner, but distant and behind a wall. It became louder. Then it turned rough and violent, as if it was tearing the tape from the inside. Another click came, and Shaw's voice returned. He sounded afraid now. He said he thought he understood. He was sitting in his office, looking through the window. It was south. The fields were south. Everything wrong with the children came from the southern direction. He said that if his future self, or any listener, ever heard the tape, they should not look south. They should not approach the farms. They should not look up. He said he feared he had contracted a sense of presence. Then he began talking quickly about the artichokes and the yarrow flowers. He said the petals of the yarrow separated from their stems and flew through the farms. He said they were what made the sulfur smell. He had picked artichokes and yarrow flowers, ignoring an old farmer who yelled at him. He took them home, dried them, and ground them together. He said the smell was sulfur. He thought the mixture might work as an inducing agent. He said he put a little powder in water and drank it. He felt sick at first, but the feeling faded after an hour. Then he rolled some of the powder into a makeshift cigarette and smoked it. He felt a weight above him. He looked up, but saw nothing. He went outside and saw nothing. A woman stared at him and told him his eyes were yellow. She asked if he was feeling well. Shaw ignored her and kept walking south. The farmer was no longer there. He looked up with no ceiling to block his view, and then he saw it. He started repeating himself after that. The same lines came back about the artichokes, the yarrow petals, the sulfur, the grinding, and the powder. But the second version was different. In the second version, he said he smoked it and nothing happened. He said it only made him sick. He said the idea was useless after all. Then the recording ended. Sophia and I sat in silence. I said it sounded like Shaw was going manic. I asked if the log had repeated at the end. I thought maybe the tape had become corrupted, or that two parts had been recorded over each other. But it had sounded too natural, too clean, too intentional. Sophia said she was not sure. She wondered what Shaw had really believed was happening to the children. She said the whole thing was odd. I searched for more tapes, but there were none in the box. I looked around the room again. Eventually, I found one tape under the edge of the carpet beneath the couch. It had no label at all. No number. Nothing. Just a plain tape with the writing worn clean away. I could not believe I had found it. Sophia immediately asked what number it was. I turned it over and shrugged. There was no way to know. I replaced the tape in the recorder. My hands were tense. I pressed play. Shaw's voice came through, polite and uncertain. He greeted a child and apologized because he seemed not to have the child's name. The boy said he was William. Shaw asked William how he was feeling. William said he felt good and asked how the doctor was. Shaw sounded almost pleased. He said he felt just as good as William. Then, he asked if William knew why he was there. William said he was there because his mother was worried about his eyes. Shaw noticed that he sounded unsure and asked if that was why William thought he was there. William must have shrugged because Shaw commented on it. Then Shaw said they should talk about the eyes. He asked William if he was one of the children who liked looking at the sky. He asked if William thought the blue sky was pretty. William said it was cool, but empty most of the time. Shaw agreed that there were not many clouds in Redgate. Then he asked why William looked up. William answered, because Sophia tells me to look up. I paused the tape. I already felt her eyes on me before I turned. Slowly, I looked at Sophia. Her face had gone still. Her eyes were no longer brown. They were yellow, the color of yarrow flowers. She did not blink. She did not move. Her expression was empty and stone hard. She said, play the tape, only 3 words. I do not know why I listened. Maybe fear can make obedience feel like survival. Maybe some deeper instinct inside me understood that whatever was sitting beside me was no longer only human. I pressed play. On the tape, Shaw tried to ask who Sophia was. William told him he saw her smelling the yellow flowers by the farm. He said she was pretty. Shaw asked why Sophia told him to look up. William said she told him and some of the other kids that they could keep Father Yarrow alive and healthy if they did. Shaw asked if William had seen Father Yarrow. William said yes. He said Father Yarrow was cooler than the sky or the clouds. He said he once saw Father Yarrow make Timmy's eyes go all black. He said it was cool. Shaw asked if Timmy was his friend. William said Timmy was his neighbor. Shaw asked how Timmy felt now. William said Sophia had told him Timmy was resting so he could wake up and keep Father Yarrow more alive and healthy. Shaw asked when this had happened. William said yesterday. Shaw asked if Timmy had woken up or if he was still sleeping. William said he saw Timmy that morning while playing outside, but he did not want to wake him, so he let him sleep on the flowers longer. The recording ended. I said Sophia's name. My voice shook. The whole world around me suddenly felt wrong, as if the walls, the light, and even the air had become fake. I did not know if this was some cruel joke arranged by people from my past. If it was too cruel to understand. Sophia looked at me and said adults did not have as many years as children did, but she did not think he would mind. Then she reached into the small pocket on the front of her dress and pulled out something dark yellow. It looked like powder. I asked what it was. That was all I managed to say before she blew it into my face. The powder went into my nose and mouth. It got into my eyes. I tried to wipe it away, but that only spread it. My throat closed. My eyes burned. My hands scraped at my face. Then the room went black. When I woke, I remembered heat first, not pain. Heat, I was lying in the fields I had heard about so many times on those tapes. I was not tired, but my body would barely move. I struggled to turn. The sky above me looked cloudy at first, but the heat was stronger than usual, stronger than any Redgate heat I remembered. Then I saw the town. Redgate was not the town I had known. The streets were broken. The houses were rotting and empty, every single one of them. Fences were rusted and bent. Some patches of grass were dead, while other growth had become wild and thick. Flies buzzed everywhere. The town looked like a shell left behind after something had eaten everything inside it. There were no people. No cars moving, no voices, just silence. No, not silence. There was a low humming sound under everything. I heard footsteps crunching through dead roots. I turned and saw Sophia walking toward me. Her white sundress was bright in that dead place, the petal pattern clear across the fabric. She hummed softly as she came closer. The tune was the same strange rhyme from William's recording. She stopped in front of me. I did not look up at her when she kneeled. I asked if I had been drugged. My words came out thick and slow. Sophia said I had wandered into this place and seen what was not there. She said it hardly worked anymore, but sometimes it still did. I was trying to understand her when I noticed something behind her. A thin, faint smoke or light was twisting into her stomach. It stretched upward from her body like a narrow cord. That was when I realized the day was not cloudy. Above Redgate, 8 limbs stretched from the corners of the horizon. They were long, thin, and jointless, arching across the sky. Their surfaces looked dry and cracked, and dark sap like fluid sat inside the splits. Sometimes that black liquid dripped down onto houses or streets below. There was no clear body between the limbs. They knotted together at one central point, folding into each other too many times for my eyes to understand. Where a face should have been, there was only a sheet of yellow film, with something thick and wet moving slowly underneath it. It did not blink. It had nothing to blink with. The thin cord of yellow light ran from that knotted center down into Sophia's stomach, like an umbilical cord as thin as fishing line. It flickered instead of pulsing. I tried to speak, but my words came out as breath. Panic took over. I started heaving, and my heart beat faster and faster. I could not explain what I was seeing. I could not make my mind accept that something that large was above us. Sophia told me to keep looking. I said it was like the children. I told her she had done the same thing to them. She had taken them. I did not know what had happened to those children, but I could imagine enough. Sophia shouted at me to look at it. Her voice changed when she shouted. It became like William's voice on the tape, deep and layered, as if more than one mouth had spoken at once. I tried to stand. I was weak and dizzy, but fear pulled me up. I stumbled toward her. Sophia watched me because she knew I could not escape. That made her careless. I got close enough to lean into her shoulder, and then I bit down as hard as I could. Tears ran down my face as I bit her. I was not only afraid, I was grieving. The town where I had once lived had been torn open into a dead gray nightmare, all hidden behind some kind of illusion. My tooth sank into her skin. One of my teeth cracked or broke. Sophia screamed and shoved me away. Black blood spilled from the wound. She shouted again for me to look at it. Her jaw widened. Her limbs stretched and cracked. Her body began changing in ways that no human body should. I ran. I stumbled down the street while her footsteps started behind me. She no longer looked like a person. She looked as far from human as a human is from an insect. I found an old rusted car and pulled the door open. I slid inside and slammed it shut. I searched for anything that could help me. Under the ruined dashboard, near the torn transmission, I found a metal pipe. I twisted it free. Sophia slammed into the car door. She tore at the side of the car until the glass shattered. I stabbed blindly through the broken window. The pipe caught in something soft, and she pulled back with a wet, choking howl. I ran out the other side of the car and around a building. Her footsteps came after me. I climbed through a broken window, and the glass tore into my thighs as I forced myself inside. Fear pushed me upward instead of outward. The hallways were broken, but I found stairs. I grabbed a broken wooden baseball bat on the way. It was not much, but it was something. I reached the roof of the building. The building was 3 stories high. From the roof, I could see the streets below, but there was no life anywhere. I looked up and saw the thing in the sky again. The hum coming from it was louder now. I traced the cord of light downward and saw that it was moving toward me from below. Sophia was close. I searched the roof for another way out and saw a ladder, but it was broken. If I jumped, I might break both legs, or worse. Still, staying there meant facing Sophia. I stood there, trapped, with the dead town spread out around me. Everything was gray and ruined. For one moment, I thought giving up might be the only mercy left. Maybe it was a nightmare. Maybe if I stopped fighting, I would wake up. Then, Sophia reached the roof. She shouted, "Feed it." Her body was tall and bent, almost folded wrong. Black liquid dripped from her shoulder and stomach. She walked toward me slowly. She did not rush. She knew there was nowhere for me to go. I could not fight anymore. I could not think of a place to run. Her large hand closed around my neck and lifted me off the roof. She turned me around and held me facing the thing in the sky. The heat burned into my eyes. I grew weak as I stared up at the knotted center of it, huge over the town. Its limbs shifted and pulled. A groan rolled through the valley, a sound I had never heard before and never want to hear again. Then Sophia tightened her grip and threw me off the roof. The fall felt long, too long. I wondered if my life was supposed to flash before my eyes, but nothing came. The ground did not seem to get closer. Then I felt my hands catch something. I looked up and saw that I had grabbed the bottom of the broken ladder without even realizing it. Some deep part of me still wanted to live. I hung there, shaking. I could not climb back up because Sophia was above me. I decided falling from there would be better than falling from the roof. So I let go. I hit the ground hard. Something in my chest cracked, and the air left my body. I could not breathe. For a moment, adrenaline hid the pain, but only for a moment. Then pain flooded through me, and I screamed. My scream echoed through the dead town of Redgate. I was lying there, dying slowly, when I saw Sophia above me on the edge of the roof. She climbed over the ledge. Then she jumped. This time, no hidden instinct could save me. I was awake. I was aware. I was helpless. Then I realized I was still holding the broken bat in my left hand. I lifted it with the last strength I had and pointed it upward. Sophia came down onto it. The bat went through her. Her body collapsed over me, and hot blood and innards spilled across my chest and face. She covered me like a blanket. For a moment, she stayed twisted and wrong. Then, her body slowly changed back into the young woman in the white sundress, though the dress was torn so badly it was barely a dress anymore. Thunder cracked in the sky, though there was no storm. The yellow cord of light thinned and vanished from Sophia's body. A dying animal sound rolled across the valley. The thing above us squirmed. Its long limbs pulled in and stretched out like it was in pain. It did not vanish. It was not only an illusion. I watched it twist above Redgate, staining the blue sky with its thin alien shape. My head throbbed. My eyes burned. The sun grew brighter and brighter until it was unbearable. Closing my eyes did not help. The fire came quickly. The sun caught behind the thing, and the whole sky lit up like a furnace. Heat spread for miles. Sophia's body shielded most of me, but not enough. The heat tore through my eyelids and took my sight. The last things I remember from that day are the faint hum of an engine, voices, and screams. Horrible screams. Then, I woke in a hospital in a town I had never been to. Now, I am here, in the present, telling you this through software, because my own eyes are gone. I live in darkness now. I listen to the birds when they wake. The sulfur smell of that old summer is gone. In its place, I smell marigolds. I sit in a field of them sometimes, holding a torn piece of cloth that still carries a familiar scent. I run my fingers over the stitched petals in the fabric and hold it close to my face. The world feels different now. The flowers are different. The heat of summer is calmer where I am, softened by a cool wind. I think dreams and memories can influence us depending on how strong our will is. My will was not strong enough. I thought I was facing my past, but my past was not empty. It had roots. It had heat. It had hunger. I still imagine a day when my trauma does not make me fear the future. I still try to move forward and not look back. Do not make my mistake. Do not live too long inside your pain. Do not stare into the past until it starts staring back. It will burn you. It will hollow you out. It will destroy you. In my case, it changed my reality. Do not dwell on your pain. And then, every so often, when the wind moves through the flowers and the air becomes still, I hear a voice beside me. It asks, "How are the flowers today, Mr. Langley?" Story 2. I had not even opened the first box in my new apartment when someone knocked on my door. For a second, I just stood there in the middle of the living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes, sweat sticking to my shirt, wondering who could already be visiting me. I had only been in the place for maybe half an hour. Most of my things were still packed. My mattress was leaning against the bedroom wall. My books were still in a box. My kitchen stuff was somewhere in the mess, and I had no idea where I had put my phone charger. The knock came again, not loud, but firm enough to make me stop what I was doing. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Standing on the other side was an older man with his gray hair tied back in a ponytail. He had a thick mustache that was mostly gray, and it moved a little every time he breathed through his nose. His face looked friendly enough, but there was something tired about him, like he had been awake too long or had spent too many years dealing with other people's problems. It was my landlord, Henderson, at least. That was what he had told me to call him. I still was not sure if Henderson was his first name or his last name. He had never really made that clear, and I had never bothered to ask. I was just happy I had found a place I could afford. I opened the door. "Hey, new tenant," he said with a small smile. "How are you doing? Getting settled in?" I nodded and glanced back at the mess behind me. Yeah, just unpacking my stuff. That was only half true. Mostly I was standing around trying to figure out where to even begin. But I was still glad to be there. The apartment was small, and it was definitely not fancy, but it was mine. It was in a neighborhood I had wanted to live in for years, one of those city areas full of coffee shops, little bars, record stores, and people around my age walking dogs they probably could barely afford to own. The rent was not cheap, but compared to everything else I had seen, it was a miracle. The building itself was old, just a small block with maybe 6 apartments in total. Nothing about it looked special from the outside. The paint was fading in a few spots. The front stairs creaked, and the hallway smelled a little like dust and old carpet. But it had character, or at least that was what I kept telling myself. More importantly, it was within my budget. I had found the place by luck. I had emailed Henderson about the listing, expecting the usual silence or a reply saying it had already been rented. Instead, he responded almost right away. By the next day, I had seen the unit. By the end of the week, I had paid first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit. A few days later, I was packing up my old room and moving across town. "Good to hear," Henderson said. "Listen, I was going over some stuff. My stomach tightened a little. Of course," I thought. Typical landlord timing. Wait until I have already carried all my boxes inside. Then tell me there is some problem with the apartment. Maybe the heat did not work. Maybe the air conditioner was broken. Maybe there was some strange fee he forgot to mention. I just hoped it was not something expensive or annoying, because the air that night was already hot and heavy, and the apartment felt like it had been closed up all summer. "It's just the paperwork," he continued. "One last page you forgot to initial." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled sheet of paper. It looked like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. He handed it to me. The moment I saw it, I felt a strange kind of familiarity. When he had first given me the lease, it had not been in a neat folder or even stapled together. It was just a loose stack of papers, maybe 5 sheets, all slightly bent at the corners. I had read through them quickly at his kitchen table while he sat across from me, tapping a pen against his mug. This page had been in the stack back then, too. I remembered it, because I thought it had been a joke. I thought maybe it had been slipped into the lease by mistake, like some weird piece of building humor that was not meant for me. But now, Henderson was standing at my door, serious as ever, waiting for me to sign it. I looked down and read the page again. The first line said the vents were old and sometimes rattled. It also said I did not hear voices coming from them. The second line said Henderson did not have a brother, and if anyone claimed to be his brother, I should notify Henderson immediately. The third line said there were absolutely no returns of deposits. I stared at the paper, then looked back at him. "Sorry," I said slowly. "I thought this was like a joke or something." "No," Henderson said. "It's part of our standard paperwork." I looked at the page again. Do people really think they hear voices from the vents? "It happened a long time ago," he said. "One of our old tenants kept calling me and saying someone was talking to her through the vents. So I added that line as a warning for new residents." "A warning? More like a reminder," he said. "The vents rattle. That's all." "All right," I said. "Kind of weird, but okay. Do you need a pen?" Before I could answer, he reached into his other pocket and pulled out a black ballpoint pen. He clicked it and held it out to me. I took it, placed the crumpled paper on top of one of my boxes, and bent over to initial each line. As I was about to sign, I glanced at the second rule again. "Thanks," I said. "So, you don't have a brother?" "Nope." I studied his face, waiting for some kind of smile, some little sign that he knew how strange this all sounded. But his expression did not change. "So does someone try to pretend to be your brother?" I asked. Henderson took a breath through his nose. His mustache moved slightly. "It's a strange tale," he said. "Another thing that happened once. But I don't want to drag you through old ugly stories from years ago." I was honestly glad he did not want to talk about it. The sky outside was already starting to darken, and I still had a whole apartment full of boxes to open. I did not need a long story from my odd landlord on my first night. "All right," I said. I put my initials on every line and scribbled my name at the bottom. Then I handed the paper and pen back to him. "Thank you," he said, folding the paper and sliding it back into his pocket. "Well, I guess it's time for me to start tying them on. I don't live too far from here. I missed Beer 30 earlier, so I've got to make up for it. But if you have any issues, just let me know." In the morning, of course. He gave a little wave, turned, and walked away. I stepped outside with him because it felt polite, even though I did not really want to. I watched from the landing as he crossed the small lot, climbed into an older pickup truck, and drove away into the dim orange light of the street. When I got back inside, the apartment felt even quieter than before. I closed the door, locked it, and stood there for a moment, listening. Nothing, just the soft hum of the city outside, and the heavy silence of rooms that did not yet feel like mine. I decided to start with a box of books. That seemed easy enough. I cut the tape, opened the flaps, and began pulling books out one by one. I stacked them neatly on the floor, even though I did not have a bookshelf set up yet. It made the place feel a little more like home. As strange as Henderson was, I told myself I could live with it. Weird landlords were part of renting, especially in the city. Some never fixed anything. Some showed up without warning. Some acted like you were asking for too much when you expected running water and working lights. Compared to that, a strange lease page about vents and fake brothers was not the worst thing in the world. At least, that was what I thought at first. A few minutes later, I heard a sound. It was a loud, steady tapping. No, not tapping. It was deeper than that. It sounded like someone beating slowly on a drum. A hollow, rhythmic thump. It came again and again, with the same space between each hit. I stood up and looked around. At first, I thought maybe it was coming from outside. Maybe someone had music playing in another apartment. Or maybe there was construction nearby. But the sound felt too close. It seemed to be inside the walls. I walked through the living room carefully, stepping around boxes and loose bags. The apartment was small enough that it did not take long to search. I checked near the front door, then the window, then the wall that separated my place from the next unit. The sound was still there, steady and patient. I moved into the kitchen. Calling it a kitchen was generous. It had an old oven, a sink, a few cabinets, and barely enough counter space for a microwave. The refrigerator looked like it belonged in a rental from the early 2000s. I opened it and looked inside for no real reason, as if the sound might somehow be hiding in there. The fridge gave off a weak yellow light and smelled faintly of plastic and old cold air. The sound was not coming from the kitchen. I shut the fridge and walked into the bedroom. My mattress was still on the floor, and my bags of clothes were piled in one corner. The room was tight. Once I set everything up, there would barely be space to walk around the bed. I stood still and listened. The thumping continued. It was louder now, but not from the bedroom. I opened the closet door and looked inside, feeling ridiculous, like a kid checking for monsters. There was nothing there except an empty rod, a shelf, and a few dead bugs in the corner. The sound went on. I walked into the bathroom last. The bathroom was small, too. Just a toilet, a sink, a mirror, and a shower stall. The kind of bathroom where you could almost wash your hands while sitting on the toilet. The sound was loudest there. It filled the tiny room and bounced off the tile. For one awful moment, I thought it was plumbing. That was the last thing I wanted to deal with on my first night. A broken pipe, a backed-up drain, something leaking behind the wall. I crouched and checked under the sink. I looked near the toilet. I turned the shower handle just enough to see if water moved through the pipes. Nothing looked wrong. Then I stood up and saw the vent above the bathroom doorway. The sound was coming from there. The metal cover was vibrating, shaking in place with each heavy thump. Henderson had called it a rattle, but this was not what I would call a rattle. This sounded like something inside the vent was hitting the metal from the other side. I stared at it for a long moment. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the sound stopped. I waited. Nothing happened. After another minute, I went back to the living room. There was nothing I could do about an old vent right then. I had no tools out, no ladder, and no desire to call my landlord after he had already told me to wait until morning. Maybe it was just old metal shifting. Maybe the air pressure changed. Maybe the building was making normal old building noises, and I was just tired. I went back to unpacking. Soon after, I heard a car pull up outside. A moment later came the sound of doors opening, people talking, and someone laughing too loudly. The voices came closer, then stopped right outside my unit. A woman said, "Looks like we got another new neighbor." A man answered, "For now." The girl who lived here before didn't stay long. I feel like she just left in the middle of the night. They both laughed. Their footsteps moved away, and somewhere nearby, a door opened and shut. I stood there with a book in my hand, staring at my front door. I hoped they were just loud. I hoped the walls were not that thin. I also did not like the way they had said it. For now. Like people moving out of this apartment quickly was normal. Like everyone in the building already knew something I did not. I tried to shake that thought away. Then the thumping from the bathroom vent started again. This time it sounded even louder. The same steady beat. Thump, pause, thump, pause, thump. I felt my patience snap. I had been in the apartment less than an hour. I was hot, tired, hungry, and surrounded by boxes. I did not want to spend my first night listening to some haunted-sounding bathroom vent. I walked back into the bathroom, reached up, and tried to close it. The vent was just high enough that I could not get a good grip. I jumped once and missed. I jumped again and brushed my fingers against the metal. On the third try, I caught the edge and pulled hard. The cover fought me for a second, then slid shut with a sharp clack. I landed back on the floor, breathing harder than I should have been. The silence that followed felt almost too sudden. Then something hit my front door. It was a heavy thud, not a knock, a hit. I froze in the bathroom doorway. Had I been making too much noise? Had one of the neighbors come to complain because I was jumping around like an idiot? Another thud shook the door. This one was stronger. "Hello?" I called. There was no answer at first. Then came a third hit, slower and more deliberate than the others. After that, I heard the awful sound of something sliding down the wood, like a hand dragging from the top of the door toward the bottom. I walked carefully to the entryway and looked through the peephole. Whoever had hit the door was not standing right in front of it. They were several feet back, maybe 6 or 7 feet away. It was dark outside, and the dim light over the walkway did not reach them well. But I could still make out enough. The person had wild, unkempt hair. And they were completely naked, even through the peephole, even in the dark. I could tell it was an older man. His skin hung loose on his body. His shoulders were narrow. His arms and legs looked thin, but not weak. His body seemed wrong somehow, like it had been stretched and dried out. I backed away without meaning to. Then the man twitched, not like a normal shiver. His whole body jerked violently to one side, his neck bending too far, his shoulders snapping up, his knees twisting inward. Then he went still again. My mouth went dry. I grabbed my phone from a box near the door. Another thud hit the wood. Then a muffled, raspy voice came through. "Please," the voice said, "let me in." I forced myself to look through the peephole again. This time, I saw his face more clearly. Wild hair hung around it, but under that hair was a gray mustache. The same kind of mustache Henderson had. His face was older, thinner, more ruined, but it was too close to be a coincidence. The man outside looked exactly like Henderson. I said, my voice shaking. "Why?" The man moved closer to the door. I saw his mouth press against the keyhole. His teeth were dark, stained, and cracked. "Because my brother put something in there that I need," he whispered. My stomach tightened hard. "The landlord says he doesn't have a brother," I said. "He does," the voice hissed. "And he makes him live in a maintenance closet." I stared at the door. Why would he do that? The man's breath came through the keyhole in wet little bursts. Why he hides what he has in your apartment is what you should be asking. I did not want to ask. I really did not. But the words came out anyway. "What does he have in my apartment?" "Let me in," he growled, "and I will show you." "That's not happening," I said. "Go away, or I'm calling the police. I will be gone before they get here. Now let me in." "Back to the maintenance closet?" I asked, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Couldn't I just tell them you're there?" "I am the only one who can stop it," he said. "I am the only one who can stop what will happen to you." I stepped away from the door and opened my contacts. My hands were shaking badly enough that it took me a few tries to find Henderson's number. "I'm calling your brother right now," I shouted. There was silence on the other side of the door. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Finally, Henderson answered. "Hello?" "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "So, I don't really know how to explain this, but there's a naked guy outside my door claiming to be your brother." Henderson was quiet for a second. "I don't see how that would be possible," he said. His voice sounded heavier now. "But I can't help you right now." "What do you mean you can't help me? Should I call the police?" "No," Henderson said quickly. "No, they wouldn't be able to help you. That was not the answer I wanted." "What? Do you have anything made of real iron in your home?" I stared at the phone. "What? Why would that matter?" "I'm calling the police. Listen to me," Henderson said. "I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a little drunk right now, but I sober up fast, and I can help. I just need your help first." "No," I said. "I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm just going to call the cops." 6 months, he said. I blinked. "What?" 6 months free rent. The fear in my chest paused for just a second. "Say that again?" I asked. "Free rent for 6 months, Henderson said. "And to make it better, I won't raise your rent by 20% when your lease renews." I hated how fast that worked on me. In 2026, rent was insane. Deals like that did not exist. 6 months free rent in a good neighborhood was the kind of thing people joked about because it was too impossible to imagine. My brain screamed that this was wrong. that no normal landlord would offer something like that, especially while a naked old man was outside my door. But another part of my brain, the part that had just emptied my savings into deposits and moving costs, was already listening. "What do I have to do?" I asked. "I need you to buy me some time," Henderson said. "I'm going to make a pot of coffee and drive back there. If you can lure him back to the maintenance closet, that would be great." "How am I supposed to do that?" "Find something made of iron and threaten him with it," he said. "I'll be there as soon as I can." Then he hung up. I stood there in my half-unpacked living room, staring at my phone. I did not even know if I owned anything made of real iron. Most of my stuff was plastic, wood, or cheap metal from flat-pack furniture. Before I could think of anything, another heavy thud hit the door. I looked through the peephole again. This time, the man was right up against it. One bloodshot eye filled the glass. It looked hollow and wet, like it had seen too much and slept too little. "He will eventually get you, too," the man rasped, "even though you aren't the normal type." I froze. "What do you mean, normal type?" "Usually the spell is used on women," he said, "like the last few tenants." I pulled back from the door. "All right, this is crazy. Weird lease rules, twin brothers, and now magic. He is not my brother," the man hissed. "He only says that when I try to save the poor souls he rents to." My throat tightened. "And I bet he told you to hit me with iron," the man continued. "It does not matter what you hit me with. It hurts the same either way. But iron really hurts him." The old man stepped back from the door, sinking into the shadows of the walkway again. I do not know why I did what I did next. Maybe I was too curious. Maybe I was too scared to stay blind behind the door. Maybe some part of me had already started to believe him. I put the chain lock on, unlocked the door, and opened it just a crack. The humid night air rolled in. "So," I said, keeping most of my body behind the door, "what is the Henderson who was here earlier?" The naked man stood several feet away. His body twitched again, a fast jerk that made his head snap toward his shoulder. "I don't know exactly what he is," he said, "but that unit you're standing in right now is where he does all his magic." I sighed, though it came out weak. "Here we go again." "He's had about 4 tenants in that unit over the last 18 months, the man said. "They all did what you're doing. They talked to me. They doubted me. Then they all ended the same way." "How?" "Hollowed out," he said. "Empty husks. He eats what is left of them." I stared at him. "He eats them?" The man nodded, but the movement was wrong. His neck jerked twice, like something inside him was pulling strings too hard. "Not the meat," he said. "The soul. That's what he wants. And all the proof is in your apartment." He took one step closer. "Are you going to let me in or not?" We looked at each other for a long moment. Him standing naked in the hot night, shaking and twitching under the dim walkway light. Me standing in the crack of my new apartment door, still hoping this was somehow just a terrible misunderstanding. "What if you're making all of this up?" I asked. "Why would I do that?" "I don't know," I said. "What if you're just some kind of drug addict? You're twitching all over the place." "It's because of his magic," the man said. "Every time he casts a spell, he takes a little piece of me with him." "Or you're a drug addict with a crazy story," I said. "A story that lines up pretty well with a guy offering me free rent." Something changed in his face when I said that. For the first time, he looked less angry and more hurt. "You think I chose this?" he asked quietly. You think I like standing out here naked, begging some kid half my age to believe me? His neck gave another violent twitch. Then he charged. I tried to slam the door shut, but I was too slow. His arm shot through the gap. His hand crashed against the inside of the doorframe, fingers clawing wildly at the air. I fell backward, landing hard on the floor. I am trying to help you, he screamed. You goddamn fool. I am trying to save your life. At that exact moment, headlights swept across the living room window. Tires screeched outside. A truck skidded into the parking lot. The same old pickup Henderson had driven away in earlier. Let me in. The naked man shrieked. We can stop him together. That was when panic fully took over. I scrambled backward across the floor, reaching for my phone. I did not care about free rent anymore. I did not care about the lease, the deposit, or anything else. I wanted the police. I wanted lights, uniforms, sirens, normal people, anything that made sense. But before I could grab the phone, I heard a sharp snap. The chain lock broke. The little metal links clattered onto the floor. The naked old man burst into the apartment and threw himself onto me. His hands grabbed my shirt collar, twisting the fabric so tight I could barely breathe. Why won't you let me save you? He screamed in my face. Before I could answer, Henderson appeared in the doorway. How did you escape that maintenance closet? He growled. He moved faster than any man his age should have been able to move. He lunged forward, grabbed the naked man by the neck, and ripped him off me like he weighed nothing. Then he threw him across the room. The old man crashed into my half-unpacked boxes. Books spilled everywhere, sliding across the floor and hitting the wall. One box tipped over completely, spilling clothes and cables over the carpet. I crawled away from them, saw my phone near the leg of a chair, and reached for it. Henderson saw me. He stepped over and snatched it up before I could touch it. What are you doing? I shouted. I can't have you calling the cops, Henderson said. That was the moment my fear turned into something colder. I looked at the naked man on the floor. He was coughing, one hand against his throat, his body curled among my books and belongings. See? He choked out. He needs me close. What more proof do you need? Shut up, Henderson screamed. What does he mean? I asked, looking from one man to the other. Why can't we call the cops? The naked man pushed himself up onto his hands and knees. Because he can't take my blood anymore, he said. Henderson kicked him in the ribs so hard I heard something crack. I told you to shut up. Henderson roared. The sound made my stomach twist. What is he talking about? I shouted. The answer is in the vents, the old man gasped. It's all in there, vials of my blood, and the deed to this property, from before they took it over. I backed toward the kitchen. What is he talking about, Henderson? The naked man coughed and clutched his side. Why hasn't anyone come out? Why hasn't anyone called the police? I stopped moving. He was right. We had been screaming. The door chain had broken. A man had been thrown across the room. Boxes had crashed. Someone had been kicked hard enough to break bone. And yet there was nothing from the rest of the building. No neighbor opened a door. No one shouted for us to keep it down. No one pounded on the wall. The building was silent. It was not the silence of people who had not heard. It was the silence of people who knew better than to get involved. I looked back at Henderson. What is he talking about? I asked again, but this time my voice was almost a whisper. Henderson's face changed. It was not dramatic. His skin did not split open. His eyes did not turn black. Nothing like that. But the friendly landlord expression was gone. The tired smile, the casual warmth, the odd but harmless old man act, all of it vanished. What remained was cold and still. "Don't listen to him," Henderson said. His voice had dropped lower. "He's not well. Then why do you keep him in a maintenance closet instead of getting him help?" Henderson looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Because he's right," he said. "I do need him alive, and he's right about the other thing, too. No one is calling the police because, as he said, we took this place over." A heavy lump formed in my throat. "He's going to kill you," the old man wheezed from the floor. I looked at Henderson, or whatever was wearing Henderson's face. "So," I said carefully, "are you going to kill me?" "That depends," he replied almost casually. "Help me drag him back to his cage in the maintenance closet, and the same deal stands. 6 months of free rent, and no rent increase when your lease renews." My mouth felt dry. "But you won't kill me?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "No, you will simply be a human living among the Fae. I'll move my feeding room to another empty unit." The room felt like it had tilted. Fae, the word should have sounded stupid. It should have made me laugh. But nothing about the night felt normal anymore. The lease, the vent, the old man, the broken chain, the neighbors who refused to come out, Henderson's strength, the way he had changed in an instant. It all fit together in a way I wished it did not. And then one more thought came to me. No human landlord would ever offer a deal that good. Not in this city, not in 2026. That was what made my decision easier than it should have been. I looked down at the real Henderson, bruised and shaking on the floor, still watching me with desperate eyes. "Don't," he whispered. "Please." I swallowed hard. Then I nodded. The thing wearing Henderson's face smiled. I walked over, grabbed the old man by his ankles, and helped drag him out of my apartment. Story 3. For a few years, my friends and I had been seeing strange things in the woods near our area. It was not the kind of thing you could easily explain to someone without sounding crazy. At first, it was only small stuff. We would hear weird noises coming from the trees at night, sounds that did not match any animal we knew. Sometimes we would see movement between the branches, but when we looked closer, there would be nothing there. Other times, we would hear something step on dry leaves, like a person walking slowly just out of sight. But when we called out, no one answered. It was never anything too sudden in the beginning. Nothing jumped out at us. Nothing chased us. It was more like the woods were trying to get our attention, little by little. There were nights when the air around the tree line felt wrong, like something was standing in there and watching us. We could never prove anything, though. Every time we tried to point something out, it would be gone before anyone else saw it clearly. Because of that, we started feeling like maybe our minds were playing tricks on us. After a while, we came up with an idea. We decided to start taking pictures of the woods. Our thinking was simple. If we could not see things clearly in the moment, maybe the camera could catch something we missed. Maybe later, when we were back inside and calm, we could look through the pictures and find out if anything had actually been there. It sounded like a smart idea at the time. It also made the whole thing feel less scary because we were treating it like a game or an investigation. The first few times we did it, nothing really happened. We took pictures of the trees, the dark spaces between them, the open clearings, and the edge of the woods where the grass ended and the shadows began. Later, we would sit together and zoom in on every part of the pictures. We checked behind trees, near the ground, up in the branches, and deep in the darker parts of the woods. Most of the time, we found nothing. Sometimes we thought we saw a shape, but it could have been a branch, a stump, or just the way the light hit the leaves. But the more we did it, the more things started showing up. At first, there were small things that could still be explained away. A dark shape behind a tree, a pale blur in the distance, something that looked almost like a face, but could have just been leaves. We kept telling ourselves it was probably nothing. The problem was that these things kept happening. One strange picture could be a mistake. 2 or 3 could be bad lighting. But after weeks of this, and then months, it started to feel like too much of a coincidence. There were pictures where something tall and thin looked like it was standing between the trees. There were pictures where we could see what looked like a woman in a white dress, far back in the woods, her long black hair hanging down in front of her. Sometimes she looked like she had no jaw. Other times, the picture would show only a black spot where something had been standing, like it moved right before the camera caught it. We had no real way to prove what we were seeing, but the fear we felt was real. Whenever we saw something strange in the woods or in a picture, we had one rule. Run. We did not stand there and try to be brave. We did not call out to it. We did not walk closer to see if it was real. We ran as fast as we could, and we did not stop until we got back to the house. That became our safety place. Once we were inside, with the door locked and the lights on, we could breathe again. But even then, it was hard to shake the feeling that whatever was in the woods might have followed us to the edge of the yard. Then one day, we saw something that made us stop taking pictures for a long time. We were looking through the photos from the woods when we saw a face. It was not hidden enough for us to laugh it off. It was clear enough that all of us froze. It looked like a clown face, but not a circus clown. Not the kind that is supposed to make kids laugh at parties. This looked like something from a nightmare. It looked like a killer clown. The worst part was its mouth. Its jaw was missing, like the bottom half of its face had been torn away or removed. The empty space where the jaw should have been made the whole thing look wrong in a way that is hard to explain. After that, we stopped. We stopped going out to take pictures. We stopped talking about the woods as much. We tried to forget about the clown face and all the other things we thought we had seen. For a while, it worked. Life moved on. We hung out, played games, did normal stuff, and the woods became something we tried not to think about. But deep down, I do not think any of us really forgot. We just pushed it to the back of our minds. Recently, everything started again because an old friend came back to visit. I will call him Kyle, just to keep his real name private. Kyle used to hang out with me and my other friend all the time. I will call my other friend James. Back then, the three of us did almost everything together. We were the kind of group that would stay out too late, talk about creepy things, and dare each other to do stuff we probably should not have done. Kyle had moved away, so it had been a while since all three of us had been together. When he came back and stopped over to hang out, it felt like the old days again. We were sitting around, talking, remembering things we used to do, and somehow the woods came up. Once that happened, the ideas started forming before any of us even said it out loud. Since Kyle was back, we thought maybe we should go take pictures again. It felt stupid, but at the same time, it felt like something we had to do. We used to do these things as a group, and now that the trio was back together, it made sense in a strange way. So we decided to go. It was around 9:30 at night. It was not completely dark outside yet, but it was dark enough that we had to use night mode on our phones. The sky still had a deep blue color to it, that late summer kind of blue before everything turns black. But inside the woods, it was already pitch dark. It was summertime, so the trees were full of leaves. Everything was thick and overgrown. The branches covered the sky inside the woods, and barely any light made it through. From the outside, the woods looked like a wall of darkness. We did not go deep in at first. We stayed on the outskirts, walking along the edge where the open ground met the trees. We took pictures into the bigger clearings, the places where there was enough space between the trees that something could be standing there. We moved slowly, lifting our phones, snapping pictures, then taking a few steps and doing it again. The phone screens made the woods look even creepier because they brightened certain spots while leaving everything else black. James and I had done this so many times before that we knew how to act. Kyle was with us now, but he also knew enough about our old experiences to understand that we were not just messing around. We had seen things through pictures that we should not have been seeing. Long, lanky figures, tall shapes standing near streetlights, pale women in white dresses with long black hair, things with missing jaws, things that looked human until you stared too long. Sometimes, when I took a picture, I would see something through the camera lens right before the photo captured. It would be there for a second, clear enough for my brain to understand that something was standing in front of me. Then, right before the picture actually saved, it would move. The photo would only show a dark blur or an empty black spot where it had been. That had happened more than once, and because of that, I had learned to trust that quick feeling in my gut. If I saw movement, even for a second, I did not wait. That night, we kept walking along the edge of the trees, taking picture after picture. At first, nothing seemed too strange. The woods were quiet, but not completely silent. There were insects, leaves moving a little in the wind, and the normal sounds you hear outside at night. Still, everything felt heavy. It felt like the darkness inside the trees was not empty. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. It was just a quick movement, the kind you almost miss. Something shifted between the trees off to the side. I turned my phone toward it and snapped a picture without thinking. I was about to keep moving, trying to act normal, when I saw it move again. This time I knew I had seen it. It was not a branch. It was not the wind. Something was there. I gave James and Kyle the signal to run. We did not talk. We did not ask what I saw. We just ran. All three of us took off as fast as we could. The ground under our feet felt uneven, and I remember hearing our shoes hitting the dirt and grass. My heart was pounding so hard that it felt like it was in my throat. I did not look back. None of us did. Looking back felt like an invitation, like if I turned around, I would see whatever it was coming after us. We ran until we got back to the house, and only when we were inside did we finally stop. For a few minutes, we just stood there trying to breathe. No one wanted to be the first to say anything. We all knew why we had run. We all knew something had felt wrong out there. But the real fear did not hit until we started going through the pictures. We sat down and opened the photo gallery. We began scrolling through everything we had taken. Most of the pictures were just dark trees, branches, patches of leaves, and black spaces. But then, we found the first thing. It was a woman. She was standing deep in the woods. But somehow, she was bright. She looked white and clear, almost glowing against the darkness around her. She did not look normal. She did not look like a real person standing there. It was more like she was made of mist or light. You could see the trees around her and almost through her, but her shape was still clear enough to make out. She was standing there in one picture, but when we went back to the pictures before and after it, she was gone. That made the room go quiet. I had taken more than one picture of that same spot. The angle barely changed. The trees were the same. The clearing was the same. But the woman was only in one photo. She was not walking away in the next one. She was not partly hidden behind a tree. She was just gone. We kept scrolling. Then we found the face. At first, it was only a face in the darkness. I did not want to say what it looked like because I already knew, and I did not want the others to confirm it. But they saw it too. It looked like a clown, not a funny clown, not a normal clown. It had that awful, painted look with a round nose and a wide mouth, but the mouth was wrong. Inside it were sharp, serrated-looking teeth, like little points lined up in a row. The top of its head had a balding spot, which made it look even more disturbing, like it was some twisted, half-human thing trying to copy what a clown was supposed to be. We zoomed in, and that was when we noticed its hand. The hand was lower than the face, near the bottom of the picture. At first, it blended into the dark, but once we saw the shape, we could not unsee it. It looked like the clown was holding something. We zoomed in more, and my stomach dropped. It was a knife. The thing in the picture was standing in the woods, looking toward us, holding a knife. We had taken multiple pictures of that same spot, too. In every single one, the clown was there. The face was there. The hand was there. The knife was there. It was not like the woman who only appeared once. This thing stayed there through picture after picture, as if it was standing still and letting us take photos of it. Then, in the very last picture of that spot, it disappeared. That was the part that scared me the most. It was there, and then it was not. That matched the moment when I had seen movement and told everyone to run. Looking at the pictures, we realized that the last image showed the same place. But the clown was gone. That meant it had moved. It had not been a strange shape made by branches. It had not been a trick of the light. Something had been there long enough to appear in several photos, and then it had left right before we ran. We tried to explain it. We really did. We talked about shadows, branches, leaves, camera blur, and the night mode messing with the image. But none of those explanations fit. The face was too clear. The knife was too clear. And the fact that it appeared in several pictures before disappearing made it even harder to ignore. We were not laughing anymore. Nobody was trying to act tough. After we finished looking through the pictures, we tried to calm down. We told ourselves we were back inside now. The doors were locked. The windows were closed. Whatever was in the woods was out there, and we were in here. But that feeling did not last long. A little while later, we heard tapping on the windows. It was soft at first. Just a light tap, tap, tap against the glass. We all froze and looked toward the sound. For a second, nobody moved. Then it happened again, a little louder. It sounded like fingernails touching the window, not knocking like a person asking to come in, but tapping like something was testing the glass. Then the window rattled. That sound was worse. It was not just tapping anymore. It sounded like something had put its hands on the window and shaken it. The glass moved in the frame, and all the fear from the woods came rushing back into the room. None of us wanted to go check. None of us wanted to pull back the curtain and look outside. We just sat there, listening. Then we heard a baby crying. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like something from a movie. But that is what we heard. It came from outside, or at least it sounded like it did. A baby crying in the dark, somewhere near the house. It was not loud at first, but it was clear enough that all three of us heard it. There was no reason for a baby to be out there. There were no neighbors close enough for it to make sense. No one would have been walking around with a baby near the woods at that time of night. The crying went on, and none of us knew what to do. Part of my brain wanted to believe it was an animal. Maybe a fox. Maybe some other animal, making a sound that only seemed human. People say animals can sound like babies sometimes, especially at night. But after what we had just seen in those pictures, that explanation did not make me feel better. It almost felt like something outside knew what sound would bother us the most. We stayed away from the windows. We kept the lights on. We tried not to talk too loudly. Every small noise in the house made us jump. The whole place felt different, like the fear from the woods had followed us inside and was now sitting with us in the room. I kept thinking about the clown's face, the missing wrongness of it, the serrated teeth and the hand holding the knife. I kept thinking about the woman glowing in the trees, there in one picture and gone in the next. Eventually, after a long time and a lot of trouble, we managed to go to sleep. I do not know how we did it. It was not peaceful sleep. It was the kind of sleep that only happens when your body gets too tired to stay awake, even though your mind is still scared. I remember waking up more than once and listening for tapping. Every time the house made a normal sound, I thought it was starting again. Nothing else happened that night. By morning, everything looked normal. The woods were still there, quiet and green in the daylight. The windows were fine. There were no marks on the glass that we could see. There was no person outside, no baby, no clown, no woman in white. Daylight made it easier to pretend that maybe we had overreacted. But the pictures were still on the phone. We still had them. We could still zoom in and see the things we had seen the night before. That is what makes it hard to forget. It is one thing to hear a noise in the woods and wonder what it was. It is another thing to see something strange for half a second and question your own eyes. But it is different when you have pictures. Even if someone else says it is nothing, even if they tell you it is shadows or branches or a camera mistake, you know what you saw. You know what it felt like in that moment. You know how your body reacted before your brain had time to explain it away. I do not know what is in those woods. I do not know if it is something paranormal, something human, or something else completely. I only know that for years, my friends and I have seen things there that we cannot explain. We have heard noises that did not sound right. We have seen shapes that should not have been standing between the trees. And that night, when Kyle came back and the three of us decided to take pictures again, we caught something that I wish we had never seen. After that, I do not look at the woods the same way anymore. Even in the daytime, I sometimes feel like something is watching from between the trees. At night, I try not to look toward them at all. The darkness under the branches feels too thick, too still, like it is hiding more than just empty space. Maybe there's a normal explanation for every single thing we saw. Maybe the camera created shapes that were never really there. Maybe the tapping was a branch, and maybe the baby crying was an animal. But I do not believe that. Not really. Because I saw the clown standing there in the pictures. I saw the knife in its hand. I saw it appear again and again in the same spot. And then I saw the last picture where it was gone. And I remember exactly when it disappeared. It disappeared right before we ran. Story 4. When I was a kid, my mom read the same story to me every single night before bed. It was a small children's book with old-looking pages and bright drawings that looked simple at first. The story was about a creature that could control electricity. It could pull power from the air, from wires, from storms, and even from the ground. The creature was called El Rayo, the lightning bolt. At that age, I never thought much about it. To me, it was just another bedtime story. The pictures were strange, and the creature looked scary in a cartoon kind of way, but I never believed it was real. Kids don't think too deeply about things like that. A monster in a book is only a monster in a book. A scary drawing on a page cannot step into your house. A warning inside a children's story cannot actually matter. But my mom always treated that book differently. She never read it like the other stories. When she read fairy tales, she smiled. When she read funny books, she used silly voices and made me laugh. But whenever she opened El Rayo, her voice became quiet and serious. Sometimes she would stop after a page and look at me, almost like she wanted to make sure I was listening. She would say, "This book is very important." I never understood what she meant. For years, those words stayed in the back of my mind. Very important. How could a children's book be very important? I used to think maybe it had belonged to someone in our family. Maybe it was old or rare or something my grandmother had given her. Maybe it had a message hidden inside it that adults understood and kids did not. But as I grew older, I stopped asking questions about it. The book disappeared somewhere in the house, and life moved on. A few days ago, I finally found out why she had always said that. It was a morning in January. I remember that clearly because it was supposed to be cold outside. It was the kind of winter morning where you expected frost on the windows and a cold floor under your feet. But when I woke up, the first thing I noticed was heat. Not normal heat. Not the kind of warmth you get when the heater has been running too long. This felt heavy. It filled the room like thick air pressing down on my skin. I sat up in bed, confused and already sweating. My shirt was sticking to my back. My pillow felt warm. For a moment, I thought maybe I had a fever. But when I stood up, I realized the whole room felt wrong. It was like the air itself had been trapped in an oven. I opened my closet and tried to choose what to wear, but I could barely think. I pulled out jeans and a sweatshirt because it was winter, but the idea of putting them on made me feel sick. I shouted down the hallway, "Mom, can you turn on the AC?" Her voice came back from the other side of the house. "It's already on." That made no sense. I walked over to the vent in my room and held my hand under it. Air was coming out, but it was weak. It was barely cool at all. I yelled again, asking her to turn it up. "It's already at max," she said. I stood there with my hand under the vent, staring at it like it had betrayed me. The AC was on full blast, but the house still felt like it was burning. I tried to ignore it. I told myself maybe the system was broken. Maybe Dad would call someone to fix it. Maybe this was just one of those weird house problems people complain about. I forced myself into pants and a sweatshirt anyway. The second I stepped out of my room, the heat hit me so hard that I stepped back. It was worse in the hallway, much worse. It felt like opening the door of a furnace. My lungs tightened and my skin prickled. For one terrifying second, I imagined I was standing near a wall of fire. No, not fire. Lava. That was the only word that came close. I rushed back into my room, ripped off the sweatshirt, and changed into shorts and a thin shirt, even though it was January. I didn't care how cold it was supposed to be outside. I couldn't survive in winter clothes inside that house. When I came out again, I walked straight to the dining table. My mom and dad had put out a charcuterie board for breakfast. Crackers, cheese, salami, some fruit, and a few other things were spread across a wooden tray. My sister Willow was already sitting there, eating cheese on Ritz crackers like nothing was wrong. I stared at the food, then looked toward the living room. Mom, why are we having charcuterie for breakfast? My mom didn't answer right away. She and my dad were sitting near the TV, both facing the screen. That was when I noticed their faces. I had never seen my parents look like that before. They were scared, not annoyed, not worried in the normal parent way. Scared, real fear. The kind of fear that makes people forget how to move. My parents were not the type to panic. They handled problems calmly. If something broke, they fixed it. If something went wrong, they talked through it. But that morning, they looked frozen. My mom finally said, I didn't have time to make anything. Just eat. Her voice shook. That was when I knew something was seriously wrong. I leaned closer to Willow and whispered, Hey, what's up with Mom and Dad? She looked at me with her cheeks full of food, then shrugged. Completely useless. She always had a talent for being no help at the worst possible time. I stood up slowly and started moving toward the TV. I wanted to see what they were watching. But before I got close enough, Dad grabbed the remote and turned it off. The room went quiet except for the low hum of the struggling air conditioner. What were you guys watching? I asked. Dad looked at me for a second. He didn't answer. Then he stood up and walked down the hallway toward his room. Mom followed him. A moment later, their bedroom door slammed shut. I stood in the living room, staring after them. What the hell was going on? I should have turned the TV back on right then. I know that now. I could have seen the news. I could have understood sooner. But I didn't. Instead, I did the dumb thing. I started creeping down the hallway toward my parents' room. I wanted to hear what they were saying. I moved slowly, careful with every step. The hallway felt even hotter than before, and the air had a strange, dry feeling to it, like right before a thunderstorm, except there was no storm. I made it halfway down the hall before Willow's voice came from behind me. What are you doing? I spun around and put a finger to my lips. Shh, she stared at me, still chewing. Then, because she was Willow, she threw a piece of salami at me. It hit me right in the face. I glared at her and threw it back. She laughed quietly, which only made me more annoyed. I turned back around and continued toward the door. I was just about to press my ear to it when the floor betrayed me. Creak, the sound was loud in the quiet hallway. I panicked and ran back into the living room. I threw myself onto the couch like I had been sitting there the whole time. When I landed, I felt something hard under the cushion. It didn't hurt much, but I yelled. Ouch! Anyway, my parents came rushing out of their room so fast that I almost jumped off the couch. Are you okay?" They shouted together. Their voices were so loud and full of fear that it scared me more than the heat did. "I'm fine," I said quickly. "There's just something hard under the cushion." Mom and Dad looked at each other. Their eyes widened. Then they both hurried toward the couch. I jumped up, thinking I was in trouble, but Mom wasn't looking at me. She was digging between the cushions, searching for whatever I had landed on. A second later, she pulled something out. It was the book, that old children's book. I couldn't see the title clearly, but I knew it immediately. El Rayo, the lightning bolt. The book my mom had read to me over and over again when I was little. The book she had called very important. Mom held it tightly against her chest and rushed back toward the bedroom. I tried to follow, but Dad stepped in front of me. "This is adult business, son," he said. "Watch some TV." I stared at him. "Why are you trying to keep this from me? What's so important about that book?" His face changed. The fear was still there, but now something harder came over it. He looked more serious than I had ever seen him. "Watch some TV," he said. "I won't ask again." But no complaining. Then he turned and went back to the bedroom. The door slammed shut again. I looked at Willow. For once, she seemed just as confused as I was. I sat down and turned on the TV because, honestly, I didn't know what else to do. I started flipping channels, looking for the weather station. If it was this hot in January, there had to be a reason. Maybe some kind of freak heat wave. Maybe a power issue. Maybe something on the news would explain why my parents were acting like the world had ended. Before I found the channel, a deep boom rolled through the air. Then another. And another. The whole house shook. The windows rattled. The lights flickered. It wasn't thunder. At least not normal thunder. It sounded like explosions in the distance, one after another, heavy and sharp. Willow and I ran to the front window. A second later, Mom and Dad came out of the hallway and joined us. Outside, every power line we could see was on fire. The wires were swinging from their wooden poles, sparking and burning. Bright flashes jumped from line to line. Smoke rose into the sky. Pieces of burning cable snapped loose and fell onto the street. Before either of us could say a word, Mom and Dad grabbed us and rushed us back into their bedroom. That was when I knew I was finally going to get answers. Willow and I sat on the bed while Mom and Dad whispered in the corner. The heat in the room was terrible, but nobody mentioned it anymore. After what we had just seen outside, the heat felt like only one part of something much bigger. Willow looked at me with wide eyes. "What do you think is going on?" "I have no idea," I said. Then I looked at our parents. "But I think we're about to find out." Dad opened a drawer and took out the book. I knew it. That book had something to do with all of this. Mom sat down with it in her lap. Her hands were shaking as she touched the cover. "Do you remember when I used to read this to you?" she asked. Willow and I both nodded. "I remember you saying it was very important," I said. "Are you finally going to tell us why?" Mom swallowed and nodded. "This book is about a creature called El Rayo," she said. "In English, it means the lightning bolt. When you read it as a child, it seems like a normal, scary story. But near the end, it gives signs. Signs that tell people when El Rayo is near." Willow suddenly went pale. Her breathing became fast. Dad moved closer to her and put a hand on her shoulder. I looked from her to Mom. "What signs?" Mom opened the book and turned to a page near the end. Her eyes moved across the words. "The first sign is extreme heat," she said. "Heat that feels impossible." My stomach dropped. The hallway, the living room, the whole house feeling like an oven in the middle of winter. It could be a coincidence, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. Mom did not answer. She turned the page. The second sign is power line explosions. The room went silent. Outside, somewhere far away, another boom shook the windows. I felt cold for the first time that morning, even with the terrible heat pressing around us. Mom turned another page. The third sign is large numbers of dead animals. I waited for her to explain more, but she stopped. Her lips pressed together, and I could tell there was something she did not want to say. Dad spoke instead. There have been reports all morning. Birds falling from the sky, pets found dead in yards, whole groups of animals just dropping. I stared at him. The book wasn't just a book. The signs were happening. El Rayo was real. My chest tightened, and panic rushed into me all at once. I stood up from the bed, unable to sit still. "So what are you saying?" I asked. "That thing is here? That monster from the book is actually here?" Mom nodded slowly. I felt like the room tilted. I started talking too fast. "Are we going to die? What do we do? Why didn't you tell us before? Why would you keep this from us?" "Calm down," Mom said. "How can I calm down?" I shouted. "There's a monster nearby." Mom gave me the look, the mom stare. Even in the middle of a nightmare, it worked. I shut my mouth and sat back down. She took a breath. "Governments around the world know about this creature. There are plans for when it appears, but those plans only begin when enough signs are confirmed in one area. Until then, nobody wants to cause panic." That did not make me feel much better. "Enough signs?" Mom looked down at the book again. "There is one more sign." Her hands were shaking so hard now that the pages trembled. "The final sign is thunder with no boom." The sound hit the house like a bomb. It was the loudest thunder I had ever heard. It shook my bones. Willow screamed. I covered my ears. Dad looked toward the window. The sky outside was clear. No clouds, no rain, no storm. Mom and Dad looked at each other. "TV," Dad said. Now we all rushed back to the living room. Dad turned the TV on, and for a few seconds there was only static. Then the screen changed. A loud emergency alert tone filled the house. A message appeared. "All civilians in the Chicago area are ordered to make their way to City Hall immediately. Failure to comply may result in serious injury or death. Further instructions will be given upon arrival." Nobody moved. Then Dad shouted, "Everybody in the car." That snapped us out of it. We ran. Shoes, keys, front door, driveway, car. Everything happened too fast to remember clearly. One moment, I was inside the house. The next, I was in the back seat beside Willow, while Dad started the engine, and Mom kept looking out the windows like she expected something to land on the car. We pulled onto the road and headed toward City Hall. The streets were chaos. People were driving too fast. Some cars had been abandoned. Smoke rose from several blocks away. Sirens screamed in every direction. The sky stayed clear and bright, which somehow made everything worse. If there had been black storm clouds above us, maybe the thunder would have made sense. But there was nothing up there. Just blue sky and thunder. We were only a few blocks away when traffic stopped completely. Dad hit the horn. "Come on."